take a guess? Yeah. You have to build it, exactly right. So what research tells us is it's something that we can develop with time. You don't just, you're not just born with resilience and then, you have it or you don't have it. It actually is something that is developed and grown with time. And when we talk about resilience, it says that people's character is actually born out of times of difficulties and challenge. And even the Bible talks about suffering producing perseverance, perseverance producing character, and character producing hope. So anyone can be cooperative and understanding and patient when things are going well, but what happens when we respond when there is a trauma or a challenge and those things strike? So I'm going to give you an example from about now almost 15 years ago. In 2011, there was a 9-point-something magnitude earthquake in Japan that basically destroyed much of the country. And yet, when international reporters landed in Japan, they didn't see chaos and trauma and challenges. Of course, they saw those things. But what they were super interested in noticing is that people were resilient. They were waiting in line at distribution centers for supplies for hours. They didn't complain. They didn't create fights. They didn't create, even though some of the supplies were scarce, there was no panic. There was no distress. So they wondered how they could do this. In the midst of all that destruction, people were still rebuilding. And that is the point of resilience. It's not that I ignore the earthquake around me or the challenges around me, but how do I build despite that? How can there be simultaneous building even when there is destruction? So all these reporters were saying that amongst the destruction, there was also construction. So how can we build harmony after a challenging time? Resilience and struggles don't happen overnight. Real success does not happen overnight. In fact, sometimes we have to endure pain and difficulty. And this will help us to problem solve with the trials around us. When we persevere, we are able to grow around our failures and learn new ways to problem solve. And in doing so, this is how the muscle of resilience grows. So with failure comes a lot of different things. We are able to adjust and focus on what really matters and what our values are. We can face that struggle head on, and that helps us to eliminate our fears. You can try to learn new things that you may not have tried otherwise because you want to solve this problem. You also have empathy and emotional intelligence towards other people that are also suffering, and you are willing to try again and look for new effective ways to do this. So in Proverbs, in Proverbs 24:16, there's a verse that is very similar to this Japanese concept that talks about falling down 7 times and standing up 8. So it's a verse, but it's actually a way of life in Japan. And this is how they were able to overcome that earthquake and work through it together. So the field of which resilience kind of falls under that I work in is the field of positive psychology. And this doesn't mean that we just paint on a smile even when there's destruction and stress and pain and say everything is positive. That's not at all what this is about. This is the study of optimal human functioning. It's a way to better understand how humans and people and their communities, how they thrive and how they grow. And when we focus on this, we have seen that people looking for ways to overcome difficulties and challenges tend to do better academically, tend to have a sense of mastery, tend to have a sense of goal setting and higher levels of self-control and perseverance. And so from a spiritual perspective, we also know that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called to his purpose. And so just like this Japanese principle, no matter how many times we get knocked down, we can get back up again. And it is important to know that there are no quick fixes, but as long as we're tenacious and we keep trying and we can adapt in order to survive, and we have this intrinsic motivation that will help us. So of course, challenges come in many forms, right? There could be a health crisis, a workplace issue, a business or a career challenge, feeling empty and lonely, and we know stories about all of these things biblically as well. There could be relationship issues that we have with family, friends, spouses, relationship issues, failures that we've experienced, financial crises, all kinds of things, injustices that we face, people that don't understand us, academic pressures, and like I said, mental health crises. So how do we overcome this in order to become resilient? We have to rise up, but there is a process to doing so. Oftentimes people want to brush everything under the rug really quickly and just move on, right? But research tells us that when we process things, when we sit with it, we can learn a lot about why we are grieving in this situation. What need needs to be met? What things are missing? What things can we work on to fix? Where can we get some acceptance about the situation? What have we learned, and how can we persevere? How can we connect with others through this struggle? How can we grow and walk towards resilience to thrive? So there are tons of definitions of resilience out there, but this one is one that I have found that can be comprehensive and really beneficial, which is that resilience is not the absence of difficulty, but it's the conscious choice to go through the full spectrum of our human emotions, but not to be consumed by them, and to thrive and rise despite them. So there's tons of definitions, like I said, for resilience, but the first thing that we need to do sometimes is to grieve the old way and try to think of how we can change the things that we're experiencing to start a new trajectory. Grieving is often thought about as something that, I don't know where the screen went. Oh, I don't know what happened. It started flashing over here too. Let's try this again. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, it's not connected. It's usually dark. Yeah, that's why it's. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Oh, okay. We're going to wait for the Wi-Fi to come back, but I'll continue talking. So basically, we often think that grieving is for a loved one passing away. But grieving can be any time there's a change in trajectory. You were going along one way, and then something came and changed that trajectory from what it is. And so oftentimes, if the screen was showing, you would see these jars with these black balls in them. And we think oftentimes that grief with time will shrink. Instead, what happens is that we fill our life with new experiences, and it makes it look like the jar is larger and our grief is smaller. So yeah, with grief, we also have to have a level of acceptance at times that this struggle has happened. And resilience research again tells us that we shouldn't forget about the struggle that we're going through or brush it under the rug, but instead, how do we accept that struggle? This has happened. What do I do now? Okay? It's like saying there is rain outside and I'm super upset by the rain. Instead of saying I'm super upset by the rain, let me think about how to solve this problem. Can I instead take an umbrella or a raincoat or put a hood on instead of bemoaning the rain that isn't going to go away? No, you're fine. There you go. There we go. It's back. Oh, it needs the code. I don't remember it. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So, yeah, like I said, instead of saying, oh, it's raining outside, this is terrible, I had plans outdoors, this is awful, um, think about what we can do instead. Either take an umbrella, take a raincoat, do something else that will help us to combat the rain. So it's the same with our struggles. If we think about our struggles, don't think just about the struggle. Think about what went well in that situation. Did I learn something new about myself? Did I make a connection with somebody that I'm now, friends with, or they are supportive? What needs adjustment in my life, and how do I challenge myself for next time? Where did I grow? Where did I learn? And where do I need some balance? And so one of the ways that we can look about that is some other concept that is very much related to resilience, which is the concept of perseverance. Perseverance is the steadfastness in doing something even when there is difficulties and challenge. And we can often see these things even in nature. For example, a butterfly will stay in its cocoon for 21 days, looks almost like it's non-existent anymore, and then it comes out of that cocoon and lives its full potential. And so resilience is very much related to perseverance, and it's important to help us to find that perseverance in order to find resilience. Resilient people often look for opportunities in every challenge. I recently had a client who, after 25 years in her job, was let go by her company. And she was absolutely devastated because she loved her job. She had been loyal to them for 25 years, and they decided to just let her go without any preparation. However, after a few months of that grief and a few months of that being sad and upset, which is again normal, she decided to look for an opportunity within this struggle. And for her, she said, I have 25 years of experience. Why don't I turn my work into a consulting business? And indeed, that is what she did. And there was an opportunity in this challenge, and this business went on to thrive. She got many contracts and thrived even more than when she was at her original company. The other thing that resilient people do is they will savor stillness. They will not be agitated and distressed, anxious in the time of distress. And the Bible even talks about being still and waiting for God to help us figure out this situation. There is research that when we are still, we can actually process things better. We can bank information in our minds that we can use later when things are not going so well. And so savoring is really important about what we can glean information-wise in this time that we can use later. We also should know that nothing is insurmountable. There are times where challenges feel really difficult and upsetting and a problem, but nothing is insurmountable, and we can take time to build connections and challenge ourselves in those difficult times. You also have permission to be human. Of course, sometimes when we're going through difficulty, we need to cry or be sad or be, upset over something. But then focus on your strengths, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, that will help us to walk out of that situation strongly and with help. Perseverance leads to learning. Learning leads to adaptability, and adaptability leads us to resilience. So we've been talking about this word resilience quite a bit. What is it? What is resilience? It's the ability to move from a world where we are striving and carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders to a world where we are thriving even when things around us don't seem so well, okay? And so just like this flower is able to thrive in this environment and able to grow, even though the environment around it is arid and dry and lacks nutrients, it is still growing and thriving. And the way that we can do this is because we have a strong mind that helps us to overcome our difficulties, and we also have faith that helps us to overcome our challenges. There are so many biblical examples of people that were resilient. Here's some pictures of them: Job, Joseph, St. Paul, Naomi, and Ruth, Esther, and again the the verse from Proverbs, falling down 7 times and standing up 8. Many other examples of biblical characters that overcame difficulty. So what this tells us is that adversity, it is a very normal part of life, and it has been around since biblical times. It does not mean that we are weak. It just means that God's grace is what's going to get us through those times, and we can be resilient. If we think about resilience, it has 3 main components: adaptability, flexibility, and learning. If we think about how to apply all 3 of those, we will come up with a great plan about how to become more resilient. Resilient people have all the possibilities around them, not just the negative ones. They see the world more optimistically. They're increasing the repertoire of coping skills in their tool belt. Even if they're given a bad hand or given lemons, they make lemonade and change that around. And they have good emotions that buffer them against stress. The American Psychological Association tells us in order to be resilient, we can do some of these things. We can make good connections. Make connections with other people. Because the first thing that we want to do when we're struggling or stressed is what? Run and hide, right? I don't want to be around people. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to sit in my dark room and hide. But however, if we make connections, it helps us to become more resilient. It helps us to see that the crisis is not insurmountable. I can overcome it. I can accept that change is a part of life. And I can make goals and start moving towards those goals with decisive action. And I have to take care of myself in this time. The other thing that happens also is that we forget to take care of ourselves. We forget to eat, we forget to sleep, and we don't maintain a hopeful outlook. But we have to maintain a hopeful outlook. We have to keep things in perspective. We have to nurture a positive self-view, and we have to look for opportunities of self-discovery. One of the greatest tools that have been seen in research of how to overcome our struggles with resilience is to look at our own past life history. We have been resilient, and that's why you're sitting in this beautiful church today. You've been resilient at some point that has helped you to come to this point. How did you do that? Did you connect with others? Did you come to church? Did you attend meetings? Did you read more? What did you do to help yourself out of that struggle? You can then apply those same tools that you've used before towards your current challenge. And when you do that, you are able to overcome it and tailor-make a solution that will help you in this difficult time. The other important thing to do is this great finding that we have is that we all have these 24 character strengths inside of us. Each one of us has these 24 character strengths inside of us. And these are different than talents, okay? We think psychologically that a talent is something like playing the piano or playing basketball. If you practice those things enough, you can become a master at them. And if you don't practice them, they'll kind of go by the wayside. But with strengths, these things are positive parts of our character, positive parts of our personality. And they oftentimes show in times of excellence, but we can also notice them all throughout our lives. So I'll come back to that slide in a second. So these talents are not talents like basketball and piano and all these things are wonderful, but they're not necessarily grounded in morality. And therefore, they can be wasted if we don't practice. But the 24 character strengths are inside of us. They're in our behaviors, they're in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our actions. And so we can generalize them across all situations and across all times. They must contribute to the fulfillment of our lives, and they can therefore produce lots of good outcomes for us. So it's important that we discover which of these 24 character strengths we use the most. All of us here have all 24, but we use some of them more than we use other ones. And then those are the ones that we lean on to help us to get out of struggles and challenges. The other thing sometimes is our life is not very balanced. That one may be a little bit hard to read. But there are 8 areas of our life that we need to keep balanced in order to be mentally well. Oftentimes we will focus on one like our career or our finances, and we'll neglect things like our spirituality, our social life, our intellectual health, our environmental well-being, our emotional health, and we'll focus on things like work, 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 work. And that's important. I'm not saying work is not important, but if this falls out of balance and we only focus on one of those areas and the rest of them suffer, that becomes problematic. So research tells us instead we should focus on things like balancing our spirituality, our physical health, our intellectual health, our emotional health, and our relational health. SPIRE is that model. Like I said a few minutes ago, the American Psychological Association said in order to be resilient, we have to make connections. So we have to talk to people. We have to identify our feelings. And sometimes that is difficult. If you can't identify your feelings, at least start with these 4, okay? And feelings are really important to identify so we can tell people what our needs are and so they can help us through that difficult time and that challenge. Once you get through those simple emotions, you can branch out to more complex emotions. The other important thing to remember is that sometimes when we're going through a struggle, we have a lot of tunnel vision, and we think that that problem is everything. We can't see outside the problem. But our minds are actually extremely powerful, and there's a lovely quote from a psychologist, psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, and obviously he couldn't control his circumstances in that situation. He wrote lots of great books about how he was able to stay mentally sane even through such dark, challenging, difficult times. And he said, when we are no longer able to challenge the situation, we are able to challenge ourselves and our thinking. So that's really important as well. They've also found that there are 10 emotions that overlap, a lot of them overlap with the fruits of the Spirit, okay? And these 10 emotions have been shown that when we use these 10 emotions, we are able to expand our ability to think and problem solve much better than if we did not use these skills and these difficulties. The other wonderful thing is something the church in its wisdom has used for 2,000 years. The prayer of thanksgiving, right? The prayer of thanksgiving has been recited in every situation in the church. In a funeral, at the beginning of liturgy, in Ageib, in every prayer in Ageib, in baptisms, we say the thanksgiving prayer. Research is now starting to catch up and has found that people that use gratitude and have gratitude, even if they find 2 or 3 things that they are grateful for in a day, again, it expands their ability to think and to problem solve, and it helps them to appreciate the good and see it more. It shifts their thinking away from what's negative towards what's positive. So start journaling and start keeping track of the good things that are happening in your life. I talked about savoring already, so I won't mention it too much here. But again, savoring is the ability to slow down, not just rush through everything. 7 ways you can savor. You can write things down. You can take pictures of the places that you're at, but slow down, pay attention to your environment. Notice when there's a flower on the side of the road or a pretty color in the sky. That helps us to slow down and learn how to cope and to deal with our emotions and with our feelings. Of course, we have to also let go and let God. Again, when we're in a struggle, we have this tunnel vision. We don't know when this problem is going to end. We see it as catastrophic. We see it as permanent. And it is very, very, very difficult. But just remember that the same God that created the tiny little hummingbird created you and created the planets. Everything that he has is under his control. So, to be more resilient, and then we'll open it for questions or conversations. First, express gratitude. Even 2 or 3 things that you can list in a day, even in a difficult day. I'm sure you can find 1 or 2 things that you can use that can help to challenge your negative thinking, help you to see that not everything is terrible. Know your strengths and use them. Find good experiences in every day. Use those 10 positive emotions, which overlap a lot of them with the fruits of the Spirit. Examine your own story of resilience, and be altruistic and kind to others. It's also really important that once we have found our own resilience, to build empathy and genuineness and consistency towards others, to remind people of their strengths just as you are reminded of yours, and to be kind to others. And when you have done that, you will find that you have resilience on all fronts, physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually as well. We have to also understand that there are 7 areas of resilience that we can apply in our lives. If we feel competent in what we are doing, we feel good, we have something meaningful in our life. If we have confidence that we can do those things that are meaningful in our life, if we have a sense of character and our character is strong and we know what our character strengths are, if we connect with others and we don't feel alone, if we contribute to something in our lives, serve in some way, or grow in some way. And then if we have coping and a sense of control, we will feel very resilient. So I love this quote very much. It's that, let us not be surprised when we have to face difficulties. When the winds blow hard on the tree, the roots stretch and grow and become stronger. So let it be so with us. Let us not be weaklings, yielding to every wind that blows, but instead to be strong and to resist. This is a painting I have hanging in my office at home, which I love very much. I always show it in my talks when I give them. It's a self-portrait of the artist. His name is René Magritte, from 1936. And what's nice about this picture is he's looking at an egg, right? And the egg doesn't look like it has much movement or much activity or anything like that. But he's painting the potential of that egg, which is a full functioning bird. And so even on the dark and difficult and challenging days when things seem really rough, still focus on the potential of that situation and see where you can go to grow. And you could do that by watching your thoughts, watching your words, watching your actions, watching your habits, watching your character, and that ultimately becomes your destiny. And finally, since we were talking a little bit about Japan, I think my battery died maybe. Well, we were on the last slide anyway, and then we'll find it looks like it's rebooting. There is another art form out of Japan called kintsugi. And I had a beautiful picture, but some technical difficulties today. Yeah, it's okay. It looks like it just rebooted. So strange. Anyway, so kintsugi is an art form out of Japan where they will take pottery that is broken, and most of us, anything that breaks, a cup or a plate or whatever, we just pick it up, throw it away, and that's it. In Japan, they will take those broken pieces and glue them back together with gold. They repair it back together with gold. And the purpose is that if I repair it with gold, it becomes more valuable, more precious, and even stronger than if I had not repaired it with gold. So even in our broken parts, we can become more variable, more valuable, I should say, and more beautiful and more strong than we were before. Okay. While that's booting back up, do we have any questions?
So we put up on a screen, there's a QR code. You guys can scan the code and ask any questions on it as well, or also here in the church. So if you guys have any questions, feel free, raise your hand. And feel free to have any questions about what we heard and what we've been hearing. Or you can send your questions in the meantime to the QR code online, and then we'll be able to discuss them that way. So starting off from the room, any questions that you guys have here live? Any questions, thoughts that you have about what we've been hearing about resilience?
دكتور، في الحقيقة احنا بنشكر حضرتك قوي على
Thank you.
المعلومات القيمة اللي حضرتك قدمتيها،
Thank you.
ويمكن الواحد النهاردة شاف حاجات، أنا شخصيا شفت حاجات جديدة عليا. يعني
Good.
موضوع
Thank you.
الريزيلينس ده أول مرة أسمع عنه بصراحة. وكان ليا طلب، يعني لو ينفع لو حضرتك تقدري تبعت
Can you
لنا
speak into
المحاضرة
the
أو
microphone? It's hard to hear. Yeah. There.
كان لينا رجاء او طلب عند حضرتك، لو في مجال ان حضرتك نقدر ناخد المحاضره، لان المحاضره فيها نقط كتيره وقيمه، لو في مجال.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you from. So the slides are often my work product, so I don't usually share them, but I can share like a summary sheet afterwards. I can share it with the fathers. And that's the QR code for questions. The ones that were on my slide can take you to my website as well. If you have any other questions for me afterwards, you can also reach me that way.
Okay. More questions? Or we look for questions?
Yeah,
or
go
you
ahead.
want us to continue?
They can ask questions, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Any other questions? Any thoughts? Is there no questions because we don't have questions, or is there no questions because nobody wants to say anything? Which is it? I'm just curious. So the idea is, don't we all go through this, like moments of things that we have to build resilience from, because we face things and we don't know how to cope with them, we don't know how to deal with them. Anybody here deal with anything like that? That challenges you, that puts you in a place where it's like you don't know what to do, you close up, you stay by yourself, you don't want to see anyone, you start fearing, you start building up bad habits potentially. And I had a question about that. Maybe I'm just curious, like any questions or thoughts about that area? Anybody has any thoughts? Doctor?
Dr. Ageib, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed the lecture. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I would like to ask a question with regard to how resilience is something that you work on and you build. From a neuroscientific point of view, this is my area of expertise. I understand that behaviors are actually very linked to our biology and to our genetic makeups. So certain people are born with very strong muscles,
Yep.
genetically, and some people have weak muscles. And with exercise, you increase both. So in terms of resilience, certain people, I'm assuming that they can be genetically more advanced in resilience than others based on their genetic makeup. So how would you advise someone who is naturally lacking resilience?
Yes.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Yes, some people are going to be stronger than others genetically or biologically. But as we were talking about here, it is a muscle that can grow. So you teach them behaviorally how to reframe their thinking away from negative thought patterns to more positive thought patterns. You teach them to look for their strengths. Everybody has strengths. Research tells us that. And that goes, those 24 strengths are around the world. They are things that we value and the things that we house inside of us. So it doesn't matter if you're in a different country, a different race, a different place in the world, we all have these character strengths. So to work on building those, that's going to be really important as well. And to figure out how to manage our stressing situations so they don't overwhelm us, right? Acknowledge that there's a difficulty or a challenge or a heartache going on. There's lots of people that, just like I said, want to brush it under the rug, but we can learn a lot from that struggle and that stress. What am I learning about myself? What needs do I have? Where can I seek out those needs? But if I just brush everything away, I'm not learning anything. I'm not learning about what is this pain teaching me. So there's another word that we actually use is suffering well, right? It's not just suffering, And it's not just living well, it's suffering well. So using that suffering to help us to grow. Yeah. Good question.
Hi.
Hi.
I really enjoyed this as well as I know many others, but I have a question in regards to, I think our culture likes to push things under the rug, and I know that you mentioned this plenty of times during your talk, and I think there's a type of shame and there's a type of guilt that comes with it. And so I have two questions. I think that's one, and like how to be more open about it, how to be more inviting about it, especially like as servants. Like if our kids come up to us and they want to talk to us about something, if their parents are being dismissive about it, if people in school are being dismissive about it, then they start growing up and we start growing up to be also just as dismissive. And so how do we be more open about it without attaching those things that everyone else is attaching it to? And then another question I have, actually let's stick to that one first and then.
Okay. The first thing is to identify if this person is complaining and whining or they're just telling you about their life events, right? So even if they're complaining and whining, that's a way to release all that negativity that is inside them. But then what do you do about it, right? So I often tell my clients, yes, tell me everything that is going on, and I have to hold space for that pain and sit with them in that pain. Sometimes people don't need anything more than just to vent sometimes and release that pressure and that difficulty, and maybe they have nobody else to listen to them. And so it's not necessarily complaining, because people have an issue with complaining too, or that you must be ungrateful or you are not close to God if you're complaining. No, there are challenges, and I believe it was Elijah in the Bible when he was really distressed and God just gave him some food and told him to go rest. So sometimes it's something just that simple. Go get some food and get some rest and you'll feel better. And other times you really need to sit with that person in their struggle. There could be a lot of challenges they're going through, financial, social, family, whatever. So sitting with them in that and then helping them to problem solve little by little. But you're not going to get anywhere if you don't validate their experience. You have to validate their experience, or else they're going to keep coming back and talking about the same thing over and over because it hasn't been addressed. And there's nothing more important in this world than to be seen. To be seen, to be heard, to be understood. We really don't have anything more important than that because it validates your experience as a human. So do that, and then you can help them problem solve. Rather than you're not grateful, you're not, whatever. Don't do that. Validate them first, and then help them problem solve. Yeah.
And I have one more.
Yeah.
The other one is we're a product of our environment.
Yes.
So I saw that you implemented many things of like journaling and taking a minute to capture things and to just take a minute to just like take in the moment. If you're trying to explain this, or if you're trying to like work on this and live this, if you're a product of your own environment and you see that there is chaos and this is all you see, trying to take a time out and take a moment for yourself is hard, or trying to stick to a schedule where you're journaling or you're trying to be grateful could be really difficult if you feel and you see that there's nothing to be grateful for. So how do you practice that in an environment where it's not very positive?
Great question. Do it in baby steps. Even if you don't have to do a full day or an hour a day, start with 5 minutes a day. Do you see something in this 5 minutes, even 1 minute, that you can savor? And because what research tells us about savoring is you actually bank positive memories and then can withdraw from them when there's negative times. So the more that we savor and pull in things, notice things that are positive, even in a small moment, you're walking in the sidewalk and you see a flower sticking out its sidewalk. Oh, that's really nice. Take a second and savor that. That internalizes a positive memory that you can pull from later on when things are difficult. So it doesn't have to be, major life moments where you're savoring, but build up to that. Instead of rushing through your morning coffee or tea, sit down and enjoy it and really taste it and feel it. And if you're having a conversation, really pay attention to that conversation. So it can be in those micro moments and then expand it to something much larger.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Anyone have questions?
One question, I think it's similar to what Rachel asked, but it's, well, the question starts out by saying, but truly, what's wrong with pushing things under the rugs? Probably someone else. Some challenges are better off acknowledged and moved on from because excessive reflection can be negative.
I agree that excessive reflection can be negative, yes, but also some things do need to be processed. And we know that, unfortunately, specifically with women, okay, I'm not singling out the men, but specifically with women, they tend to take care of a lot of things, all right? And they tend to also have more autoimmune disorders than men, okay? Because they're constantly pushing and not, taking time to rest, or taking time to say I'm struggling, or taking time to say I'm stressed, help me out. Statistically, women have more autoimmune disorders than men, okay? Don't push things so far down that you're not getting help when you need it. And also don't dwell either. One of my other favorite words is finding some sort of balance. Finding your group, finding people that you can talk to, find people that you can, that can help you with certain things. But brushing under the rug too much, okay, this really bothered me, but I'm not gonna talk about it. This really upset me, but I'm not gonna talk about it. I'm just gonna push it down. It will find a way back up in disease and mental health issues and even spiritual struggles. So talk about it, release it, and then move forward.
Thank you, Doctor. The question, the second one that came up here as well, is how do you navigate resilience and starting a new chapter of your life if you've never been resilient before?
Yeah, good question. Rely again on your character strengths. Believe it or not, they're there, even if you don't think you've used them. So again, everybody has gotten to a certain age that you're all in this room. That means you've been resilient in something. Let's say you faced a hard test or a hard conversation. Use those same things that you did and apply it to your current struggle and current problem. So look at areas where you've had struggle, but you escaped from that vulnerable time. How did you escape? Did you talk to people? Did you talk to your father of confession? Did you get some therapy? What did you do in that situation to help yourself out? And use that same tool to help you out of this current situation. And also understand why this current situation is a struggle. What is that trying to tell you?
One more, maybe?
Sure.
And we'll see what else, if there's any more. But what are some factors that hinder us from building resilience? So resilience is a matter of bouncing back or building. You're armored up and you have more of a, you're equipped more to fight back the challenges. So what are some of the factors that hinder us from building resilience? What are the things that prevents us from building that up? And how might that influence hidden habits, or if it has any relation at all?
Yes. So with habits in particular, we tend to do things that we're familiar and comfortable with, even if they're not good for us, okay? And so people will lean on sometimes negative coping skills, substance use, tobacco, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, or even negative, environments, let's just say that, because they're familiar. And so we use that as a temporary kind of fix. But other barriers that may hinder resilience is that, again, that negative self-talk. I can't do this. I can't get out of this situation. This is the worst thing ever. That negative self-talk, as opposed to, let me reframe this and figure out how to get out of that situation, that's what ends up being more helpful. So barriers could be people, places, or things that are negative that we lean on that are not the best. Or it could be that we're not using the right tools, or believing that we can't do it when we actually can. I had a slide somewhere else, not in this slide deck, but basically a rubber band. Think of a rubber band. It stretches over whatever you're going to put it on, right? The same thing occurs with us. Our resilience stretches over our difficulties and our challenges, even when things seem impossible. Our skills will stretch.
Thank you, Doctor. I guess sort of like a follow-up to that, is there any way to look at those hidden habits and when you look at those hidden habits and you're able to say how do you identify that that's not helpful for you? You've coped with it, you've found something, like you were saying before, and you've dealt with it that way. You hid in your room, or you've taken a corner, and you've found a safe haven in that habit. How do you identify and get up from, like, identify that that's not helping you in any way, that it's actually for your negative and not for building you up?
Yeah, oftentimes it's impacting your functioning in some way. Like we always talk about depression, anxiety, it happens to everybody, right? But when do you turn from everyday depression over something that happened that upset you to more of a clinical depression? Oftentimes it's about our functioning. So I'm not functioning well at school or work. I'm not functioning well in terms of my relationships and my friendships and things like that. So even in this case, even though it may help me to cope temporarily or gives me a gratifying feeling temporarily, it's somehow impacting my functioning overall. And so that becomes a red flag that there's something wrong here that I need to fix or deal with or manage in a different way. So, yeah.
Do you have an example of something like that you could share? Like anything?
Yeah, so even something like I said with substances, people will use a substance to help them to feel better in the moment. But in the long term, it's impacting their health, it's impacting their relationships. I had a client once upon a time that was so stressed at work. She was in hospitality, like working in a major hotel, and she was so stressed at work that at the end of her shift, she would start going to the bar and having a drink just to get rid of her stress from the day. But she was drinking at work, and they were starting to notice, and eventually she was going to get fired. So even though it was dealing with her stress, it wasn't benefiting her in any way. And then she would go home and continue. And it obviously got out of control. So these habits that are not beneficial, they're not going to be functional in the long term.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any other questions or follow-ups or anything else to add or ask? Feel good? I feel like there's a question back there that needs to, it's about to pop, but it's okay. I don't know if anybody still has any. Anyone else?
I
Okay,
can
forever hold it,
pop
please.
up my, if the screen is still working. Let me see. I don't know. I may need the code again, so that way people can reach me if they need. So let me put this up. If it will let me. So here is that thing. So they glue it back together with gold instead of throwing it away. All right? And that's how we should feel after we struggle. We're not disposable. You know, we're not to be thrown away. We're to be repaired with gold. And then finally, if you need to reach me, the right QR code goes to my website, and the green QR code goes directly to my WhatsApp business texting. So you can text me that way. So the white one goes to my website, the left one goes to texting, WhatsApp texting. Thank you, Abuna.
For this valuable talk. Thank you so much for this valuable talk. And thank you for attending. I learned that I must be a little bit more Japanese than usual, right? They are very strong and resilient people, aren't they? Yeah. They never fail.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. And Dr. Ageib mentioned about how we come to God as well in times of challenges. I just, in 2 minutes, would like to read a verse from Hebrews 2:18. It says about Christ, "For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to aid those who are tempted." This is Hebrews 2:18. And I kept thinking about this word. He is able to aid those who are tempted. Was he not able to aid us without suffering? But this is a kind of empathy. When he suffered, and we see him as being the divine one, going through many challenges that we went through and even more, and he is the divine God, this is a good help to me. I find the one who is empathizing with me is God himself. So this verse is of great help. It's Hebrews 2:18. I will read it once more and then we end. For in that he himself has suffered, being tempted, he is able to aid those who are tempted. Thank you again, Dr. Christina, and we are so blessed to have you today. We have another talk in Arabic with the families, so we can just say our Father, and then we can be dismissed. Make us all worthy to pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation. Deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. The love of God the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, the gift and fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. May the peace of the Lord be with you. We have some Orban here. If you want to take Orban, we can take it quickly. And
Actually, you're good.
نقول حاجة للي جاي يدخل واللي ماشي يمشي. قصدي كده يعني، مش قصدي اللي يمشي. اتفضلوا عشان نبتدي الاجتماع بتاع الأسرة. اتفضلوا اتفضلوا.
عامل ايه؟
عاملة ايه؟
اخبارك ايه؟
اخبارك ايه؟
وحشنا كتير.
انت عشان
عمالة ازعقوا تحت واحنا نزعق فوق.
She's good. She has a little temper.
لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوفك، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك، لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوفك، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك. منساش أصلي كنت أنا عاصي طول أيامي وكل معاصي، ضربة طرية في كل كياني، من رجلي لهامة راسي. لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوفك، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك. يا ما حاولت وكنت بحاول أجد راحة ما كنتش طايل، عشت في وهم سنين خدعتني، شهوة عيني في عالم زايل. لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوفك، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك. نعمة غنية اتجهت ليا، فكت نفسي من العبودية، لما ناداني يسوع ودعاني، حالا قلبي اتغير فيا. نعمة غنية اتجهت ليا، فكت نفسي من العبودية، لما ناداني يسوع ودعاني، حالا قلبي اتغير فيا. لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوف، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك. نعمة تكفي طول الرحلة، من بدايتها لحد لقاك، ماشية معايا بكل عناية، لحد ما تيجي تاخدني معاك. نعمة تكفي طول الرحلة، من بدايتها لحد لقاك، ماشية معايا كل عناية، لحد ما تيجي تاخدني معاك. لولا النعمة ما كنت أشوفك، ولا كان ليا مكان في سماك. أنا مديون لك ربي بعمري يلي فديتني بسفك دماك.
مرة تانية فرحانين بوجود دكتور كريستين عجايبي معانا النهاردة، والموضوع اللي هتتكلم فيه اسمه positive parenting. فأهلا أهلا دكتورة، وتفضلي.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.